People who've escaped a cult? What horrifying secrets did you discover? I lived in the Divine Light community for 8 years before I finally escaped. When I joined at 19, they called it a spiritual family focused on personal growth and healing through meditation and communal living. The leader, Marcus, was this charismatic guy in his 50s who seemed to have profound answers for everything troubling your soul. What seemed completely normal back then now makes my skin crawl. People would disappear from the community on a regular basis, but we were always told they had graduated to a higher level of consciousness and moved to an advanced spiritual retreat center in Montana. Marcus would announce their graduation during our evening gatherings, saying they'd achieved true enlightenment and earned the exclusive right to join the inner circle. We'd celebrate these graduations like they were huge spiritual accomplishments. The chosen person would pack their few belongings, say tearful goodbyes to everyone, and Marcus would personally drive them to the airport in his van. We weren't allowed to contact graduates afterward because it would interfere with their advanced spiritual work and potentially drag them back to lower vibrations. At first, I believed this story completely. Jenny graduated after 3 years. She'd been struggling with severe depression and seemed genuinely happy when Marcus told her she was ready for the next level. Then Paul graduated 6 months later. He was a skilled carpenter who'd been asking uncomfortable questions about where our monthly donations actually went. Sarah graduated that winter. She'd been there longer than anyone except Marcus himself, almost 10 years total. I remember thinking it was strange that someone so established and devoted would suddenly graduate, but Marcus explained that her unwavering loyalty had finally earned her the ultimate spiritual reward. Over my 8 years there, I watched maybe 30 people graduate. Always seemed to be the ones who appeared unhappy or asked too many probing questions about community policies, but also some who were perfectly content and devoted, which made the whole system seem legitimate and fair. The weird part was what happened to their belongings afterward. After someone graduated, Marcus would sell their car if they had one, saying the money went toward community operating expenses. Their rooms would be cleaned out completely within hours, and any personal items would just disappear. Marcus said graduates didn't need material possessions anymore, since they'd transcended earthly attachments. I started getting genuinely suspicious in year 7 when my girlfriend Lisa was chosen to graduate. She was excited about advancing spiritually, but also scared because she'd never lived anywhere else as an adult. The night before she was supposed to leave, she whispered to me that something felt deeply wrong about the whole situation. She'd tried calling the retreat center in Montana using a phone number Marcus had mentioned in passing, but the number didn't exist when she dialed it. She'd also Googled the address he'd given her and discovered it was just an empty field with no buildings. When she brought these concerns to Marcus, he got furious and said her doubt proved she wasn't truly ready for advancement. Lisa left the next morning anyway, and I never heard from her again despite promises that she'd be allowed to write once settled. That's when I started paying close attention to details I'd previously ignored, like how Marcus would always drive graduates alone in his van, never letting other community members come along to say goodbye at the airport, how he'd return from these trips with fresh scratches on his hands or dirt caked under his fingernails, claiming he'd helped graduates with heavy luggage and difficult goodbyes, how the community's monthly expenses never seemed to decrease even though we consistently had fewer people to feed in-house. I started sneaking into Marcus's private office late at night when everyone was asleep. In his locked desk drawer, I found a folder labeled Transitions, containing detailed notes about each graduate, medical information, family contact details, whether anyone outside the community might come looking for them if they disappeared. But the most disturbing discovery was a hand-drawn map of our entire property showing specific locations marked with sets of initials and dates. All the initials perfectly matched graduates, and the dates matched exactly when they'd supposedly left for Montana. The locations were scattered around the back 40 acres of our land that we were told was permanently off-limits for meditation and spiritual purposes. Last week, I finally worked up the courage to hike out to one of those marked spots on the map, and what I found buried there explained everything about where the graduates really went. I stare down at the shallow grave, my hands trembling uncontrollably. The shovel slips from my grip and clatters against a rock. I'd been digging for less than 20 minutes before hitting something soft, something that wasn't dirt. Lisa's face is barely recognizable, partially decomposed and sunken in places that make my stomach heave, but I know it's her. The turquoise necklace I gave her on her birthday is still around what remains of her neck. Her blonde hair, matted with soil and decay, still has the purple streak she'd added the month before she graduated. I stumble backward, falling onto the damp forest floor, my breath coming in ragged gasps. This is real. This is happening. The map wasn't some sick joke or paranoid delusion. Marcus has been murdering people, dozens of people, and burying them on the property. All those graduates, Jenny, Paul, Sarah, all of them are here somewhere, decomposing beneath the soil we'd walked on daily, believing we were part of something pure and spiritual. I force myself to look at Lisa one more time, to burn the image into my memory. I need to remember this moment, this revelation, because it's the thing that will keep me moving forward when every instinct screams at me to curl into a ball and shut down. I'm sorry, I whisper to her. I'm so sorry I didn't figure it out sooner. I grab the shovel and Marcus's map and run deeper into the woods, away from the community buildings. I can't risk going back for my belongings. Marcus could return any minute from his supply run to town, and if he catches me here, I have no doubt I'll end up in the ground next to Lisa. The property borders national forest land, so I head in that direction, pushing through underbrush and stumbling over fallen logs until I'm well beyond the community's boundaries. Only then do I slow down to catch my breath and think, I need to tell someone. But who? The local sheriff has always been friendly with Marcus, even coming to our summer festivals and accepting donations for the department's charity drives. For all I know, he could be complicit. I need to reach authorities who won't be swayed by Marcus's influence. I walk for hours, following a Forest Service road until it meets up with the highway. By dusk, I reach a truck stop with a convenience store, diner, and gas station. I head straight for the payphone near the restrooms, grateful these relics still exist in rural areas with spotty cell service. My hands shake as I feed quarters into the slot and dial 911. Emergency services. What's your emergency? A woman's voice answers. I need to report multiple murders, I say, keeping my my voice low. There's a cult called the Divine Light Community about 15 miles west of town. The leader, Marcus, has been killing members and burying them on the property. I found at least 30 marked graves. I dug up one today and found the body of a woman named Lisa who disappeared a year ago. Sir, can I have your name, please? No, I say firmly. I just escaped from there. He'll kill me if he finds me. Please, you need to send the FBI, not local police. There are bodies all over the back 40 acres of the property. Look for disturbed earth with small rock markers, and check Marcus's office for a folder labeled Transitions and a map with initials and dates. It's all there. Sir, I hang up before she can finish. I can't risk giving my name. Not yet. I buy a baseball cap and sunglasses from the convenience store with the little cash I have, then walk 2 miles to a budget motel just off the highway. The desk clerk barely looks at me as I pay cash for one night and give a fake name. The room is dingy with cigarette-stained wallpaper and a mattress that sags in the middle, but it has a lock on the door and a TV. I turn on the local news and wait, wondering if they'll take my call seriously or dismiss it as a prank. Around 9 p.m., the regular programming cuts to breaking news. My heart pounds as I turn up the volume. We're receiving reports of a major law enforcement operation underway at the Divine Light Community Spiritual Center. The anchor says, multiple federal and state agencies have surrounded the property, and we're told this is related to an anonymous tip about possible criminal activity. We have a reporter on scene. Tom, what can you tell us? The screen splits to show a man standing in the dark, red and blue lights flashing behind him. In the distance, I can make out the main gates of the community. Janet, I'm about a quarter mile from the entrance to the Divine Light Community, which is as close as authorities are letting us get. What we know is that FBI agents arrived about an hour ago with search warrants and have established a perimeter around the entire property. We've seen several vehicles from the state crime lab arrive, and sources tell us they're preparing for what could be a major excavation operation. I sink onto the bed, relief washing over me. They believed me. They're actually doing something. We're also hearing that several community members have been detained for questioning, the reporter continues. However, sources close to the investigation say the community's leader, identified as Marcus Shepard, was not on the premises when authorities arrived. A bulletin has been issued for his vehicle, described as a white cargo van with local plates. My blood runs cold. Marcus isn't there. He's out there somewhere, possibly already aware that his carefully constructed world is crumbling. And if he figures out I'm the one who exposed him, he'll come looking for me. I turn off the TV and push a chair against the door handle. Then I sit in the dark, staring at the window, listening for the sound of a white van pulling into the parking lot. I wake to the sound of my motel room door rattling. My heart hammers in my chest as I bolt upright, expecting to see Marcus bursting in, but it's just the maid, apologizing before hurrying away. The digital clock reads 11:23 a.m. I've slept longer than intended, my body crashing after the adrenaline wore off. The TV is still on, volume low. I turn it up as I splash water on my face in the bathroom, continuing our breaking coverage of what authorities are now calling a mass grave discovery at the Divine Light Community property, the news anchor says. Her expression is grim, professional detachment, barely masking her horror. According to sources close to the investigation, forensic teams have already uncovered 7 bodies since beginning excavation last night. 7. The word hits me like a physical blow. They're finding them all. Jenny, Paul, Sarah, all those smiling faces who disappeared one by one, who we celebrated with graduation ceremonies while Marcus spoke of their spiritual journeys to Montana. I sit on the edge of the bed, unable to look away from the screen as aerial footage shows white tents erected over what I recognize as the back 40 acres. Yellow crime scene tape creates a perimeter around the entire meditation grounds. People in white Tyvek suits move methodically across the property, marking areas with small colored flags. The FBI has confirmed that Marcus Shepard, the community's founder and leader, is now considered a fugitive. The anchor continues. Shepard reportedly left the property hours before authorities arrived, driving a white 2012 cargo van with local plates. He is considered dangerous, and the public is warned not to approach if spotted. They show Marcus's photo, the official one from the community website, where he looks serene and wise, his silver hair and beard giving him the appearance of a benevolent spiritual teacher. I think of the map I found, the meticulous notes in his journal, the cold calculation behind his warm smile. My phone buzzes a cheap burner I bought at the gas station last night. The number is unknown. Hello? I answer cautiously. This is Special Agent Keller with the FBI. A woman's voice responds. I believe you made the call that led us to the Divine Light Community. We need to speak with you. My throat tightens. How did you get this number? The motel manager. We've been checking all nearby accommodations. Her voice softens slightly. You're not in trouble. We need your help. Marcus Shepard escaped before we could apprehend him, and we have reason to believe he's planning to flee the country. I close my eyes, weighing my options. How do I know this isn't Marcus trying to find me? Turn on your TV to channel 7. I'm standing outside the property right now. I switch channels and see a woman in an FBI jacket standing at the community entrance, phone to her ear. She waves at the camera. Okay, I say. What do you need from me? Information, and possibly testimony. Can we meet somewhere? 2 hours later, I'm sitting in a secure room at the local FBI field office. Agent Keller is joined by a forensic psychologist and another agent who specializes in cult deprogramming. I've spent the last hour telling them everything: how I joined at 19, believing I'd found a spiritual family, how Marcus gradually isolated us from the outside world, how people started graduating to the fictional Montana retreat. We found his journals, Agent Keller says, sliding a photo across the table. It shows a leather-bound book open to a page with neat handwriting. He documented everything: medical conditions, psychological weaknesses, even risk assessments for each victim. Victim, I repeat. The word feels strange. We never saw ourselves that way. Yes, she says firmly. So far, we've recovered 11 bodies, with ground-penetrating radar indicating at least 20 more burial sites. 11. The number staggers me. Have you identified them? Some. We found Lisa. Her expression softens. The turquoise necklace helped with identification. I nod, unable to speak. We've contacted former members. The psychologist says. Several have come forward to help identify remains. A woman named Rebecca recognized her brother's watch. He graduated 4 years ago. I remember Rebecca's brother. He'd questioned Marcus about community finances, just like Paul had before his graduation. There's something else, Agent Keller says, hesitating. Marcus's journals contain detailed accounts of each murder. He viewed them as spiritual sacrifices. The level of premeditation is extensive. She shows me more photos pages describing how Marcus selected each victim, how he administered sedatives disguised as purification tea before strangling them, how he justified each killing as necessary for the community's spiritual purity. We found entries going back 8 years, she continues. The first was just 3 months after the community was established. 8 years, the entire time I was there. While we meditated and farmed and believed we were building something beautiful, Marcus was systematically murdering people he deemed threats or burdens. The door opens and another agent enters, whispering something to Keller. Her expression changes. What is it, I ask. We just got word from a gas station attendant about 50 miles north. Marcus was there an hour ago, buying supplies. He's changed his appearance, shaved his beard, cut his hair, but the attendant recognized him from the news and called it in after he left. He's running, I say. Yes, but he doesn't know what we've found yet. The journals, the detailed evidence. She leans forward. We need your help. You know how he thinks, how he operates. Where would he go? I think about Marcus, about his contingency plans, about conversations I'd overheard. He has money hidden, I say slowly. He always talked about spiritual retreats in South America, and he keeps emergency supplies in the van, fake IDs, cash. He's paranoid, always has been. He'll avoid main highways, stick to back roads. Would he try to contact other community members? I shake my head. No. In his mind, anyone who gets caught is weak. He'd consider them compromised. I pause, remembering something. But there's a storage unit in the next county. He goes there sometimes, never takes anyone with him. Agent Keller nods to her colleague, who immediately leaves the room. On the table between us, another photo shows the excavation site. White numbered markers stand beside each grave. 32 lives ended by a man who claimed to be their spiritual guide. 32 graduations that were really murders. And somewhere out there, Marcus is still free, still dangerous, still believing in his twisted mission. We'll find him, Agent Keller says, reading my expression. People like Marcus always make mistakes when they're desperate. I hope she's right, because until Marcus is caught, none of us who escaped his community will ever truly be free. The FBI safe house is surprisingly comfortable, a small 2-bedroom ranch on the outskirts of town with faded curtains and furniture that looks like it came from a discount store clearance sale. Agent Keller calls it a temporary residence facility, but I know what it is. Protection for me, and a way to keep their star witness close. It's been 3 days since they found the journals. 3 days of debriefings, psychological evaluations, and endless questions about Marcus and the Divine Light community. The TV drones in the background, tuned to a 24-hour news channel that's been covering the story non-stop. We've identified 17 of the victims so far, Agent Keller says, setting a cup of coffee in front of me. Family members are coming in from across the country for DNA testing. I nod, unable to look away from the screen where they're showing aerial footage of the property. White tents still dot the back 40 acres like bizarre mushrooms sprouting from the earth. Each one covers a grave, a person who thought they'd found spiritual enlightenment, but instead found death at Marcus's hands. There's something else, she says, sitting across from me. Marcus was spotted at a gas station in Idaho yesterday. Security camera caught him filling up a different vehicle. Looks like he abandoned the van. My stomach tightens. He's heading west then, probably trying to reach the coast. That's what we think. We've alerted authorities in Washington and Oregon. She hesitates. We need to talk about your testimony. The U.S. attorney is willing to grant you full immunity in exchange for your cooperation. Immunity? I look up sharply. For what? I didn't do anything. You were part of the community for 8 years. There are financial records showing your signature on some documents. Marcus was running a sophisticated fraud operation alongside everything else. The realization hits me like a physical blow. Of course, Marcus had implicated all of us. He'd always been meticulous about having members sign paperwork, donation receipts, property transfers, investment documents. We'd signed without question, believing we were building something meaningful. I didn't know, I say, my voice barely audible. I never knew what I was signing. We understand that, Keller says gently, but legally, it's cleaner this way. Full immunity in exchange for your testimony about everything you witnessed. I agree, of course. What choice do I have? The alternative is potentially facing charges for crimes I didn't know I was part of. By evening, I've signed the immunity agreement and spent another 3 hours with the prosecution team preparing for the preliminary hearing. That night, I dream of Lisa. She's standing in the meditation garden, her blonde hair with the purple streak blowing in the wind. She's trying to tell me something, but I can't hear her voice. I wake up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. The news comes 2 days later. Agent Keller bursts into the safe house, her normally composed face animated with urgency. We found him, she says, turning up the volume on the TV. Bus station in Portland. He was trying to board a bus to Vancouver. The screen shows chaotic footage of law enforcement swarming a Greyhound station, and there, being led away in handcuffs, is Marcus. His beard is gone. His silver hair dyed brown and cut short, but I'd recognize his posture anywhere, that straight-backed, head-high stance of absolute conviction. He had a fake passport, Keller continues. Canadian identity, completely new name, but the facial recognition software flagged him from the bolo we put out. I stare at the screen, at the man who'd controlled every aspect of my life for 8 years, the man who'd murdered my girlfriend and at least 31 others. He looks directly at the camera for a moment, and even through the screen, I feel the weight of his gaze. He knows it was me who exposed him. He has to know. When's he being brought back? I ask. Transport team is flying him in tonight. Preliminary hearing is scheduled for Monday. The weekend passes in a blur of preparation. More survivors come forward, former members who'd left the community before I joined, people who'd visited briefly but felt something was wrong and never returned. Their stories match mine with eerie similarity. Marcus had been perfecting his methods for years before I ever arrived. A woman named Rachel tells investigators how she narrowly escaped after questioning Marcus about finances. She'd planned to graduate the next day. Another man describes how his brother disappeared after challenging Marcus's authority. The pattern is unmistakable, consistent, and horrifying. Monday arrives with a media circus outside the courthouse. I'm brought in through a back entrance, escorted by federal marshals. The courtroom is packed with journalists, former community members, and families of the victims. I keep my eyes forward, not wanting to see their grief, their anger, their questions about how we could have been so blind. Marcus is led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands and feet shackled. He looks smaller somehow, diminished without his flowing clothes and carefully cultivated spiritual demeanor. But when our eyes meet, I see the same cold calculation that always lurked beneath his warm smile. The preliminary hearing begins with the prosecution outlining the charges: 32 counts of first-degree murder, fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, and a dozen other financial crimes. The evidence is overwhelming: the journals, the bodies, the financial records showing how Marcus siphoned millions from the community's accounts into offshore holdings. When it's my turn to testify, I walk to the stand on legs that feel like they might give way at any moment. I'm sworn in, and as I sit, Marcus leans forward slightly, watching me with an intensity that makes my skin crawl. "Can you tell the court how you came to join the Divine Light community?" the prosecutor asks. I clear my throat, looking not at Marcus but at Agent Keller, who gives me an encouraging nod. "I was 19, I begin. I was lost, searching for meaning. Marcus promised spiritual enlightenment, community, purpose. He said we were building a new way of living." "And when did you first become suspicious of the defendant's activities?" I describe finding the folder labeled transitions, the map with initials and dates, the discovery of Lisa's body. As I speak, I can feel the weight of the courtroom's attention, the collective horror as they begin to understand the scale of Marcus's deception. "The defendant claimed these people had graduated to a higher spiritual plane," the prosecutor says. "What did that mean within the community?" "He told us they'd been chosen to join an advanced spiritual retreat in Montana," I explain. "He would drive them to the airport in his van. We would celebrate their spiritual advancement with a ceremony the night before. We thought it was an honor." "And what was actually happening to these individuals?" "He was murdering them," I say, my voice steady despite the nausea rising in my throat, drugging them with what he called purification tea, and then strangling them. Then he buried them on the back 40 acres of the property. Marcus doesn't flinch at my words. If anything, he looks proud, like I'm finally acknowledging his great work. The prosecutor introduces the financial evidence, next documents showing how Marcus used the graduates' assets. Cars sold, bank accounts emptied, personal possessions auctioned off. All the money funneled through a complex web of shell companies and eventually into Marcus's private accounts. He told us the money went to community expenses. I testify. But it was all a lie. Everything was a lie. By the end of the day, the judge has seen enough to bind Marcus over for trial on all counts. No bail is granted. He's deemed both a flight risk and a danger to the community. As they lead him away, Marcus finally speaks, his voice carrying clearly across the courtroom. "They were chosen," he says, his eyes locked on mine. "They were transformed. You'll understand someday." I don't respond. There's nothing to say to a man who believes murder is spiritual transformation. A man who took 8 years of my life and the lives of 32 others who trusted him. Outside the courthouse, Agent Keller walks me back to the unmarked car. "You did well in there," she says. "His trial won't be for months, but with the evidence we have, conviction is almost certain." I nod, watching the media swarm around the transport vehicle taking Marcus back to jail. "What happens now?" I ask. "Now you start rebuilding," she says simply. "And you're not alone. There are other survivors like you who need support." That night, back at the safe house, I look through the list of names the FBI has compiled, former members of the Divine Light community who've come forward. Some I recognize, others joined before my time or after I'd become too isolated to notice new faces. They're scattered across the country now, all carrying the same wounds, the same questions, the same need to understand how we all fell under Marcus's spell. I pick up my phone and dial the first number on the list. It's time to build something real from the ashes of Marcus's lies, not a community based on manipulation and fear, but a network of support for those who managed to escape. When the call connects, I take a deep breath. "Hi," I say. "My name is..." I pause, realizing I haven't said my real name aloud in years. Marcus had given us all spiritual names when we joined. "My name is..." I repeat my actual name, the one I was born with, the one I'm reclaiming. "I was at Divine Light too. I thought maybe we could talk." The courthouse steps are a gauntlet of camera flashes and shouted questions. 6 months have passed since Marcus's capture, and his trial has become a national obsession. News vans line the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal flowers. I keep my head down as Agent Keller guides me through the crush of reporters. "Mr. Shepard's defense team has claimed you fabricated evidence. Any response?" a reporter shouts, thrusting a microphone toward my face. Agent Keller steps between us. "No comment. Please respect the witness's privacy." Inside, the courtroom buzzes with hushed conversations that fall silent as we enter. The gallery is packed with families of victims, former community members, and journalists who managed to secure coveted seats. I recognize several faces, people who once meditated beside me in the Divine Light community, now here to witness Marcus face justice. I take my seat behind the prosecution table, where District Attorney Elaine Winters is arranging documents with methodical precision. She's built a reputation as relentless and meticulous, exactly what's needed against someone like Marcus. "They've added 2 more bodies to the count," she tells me quietly. 32 total now, all matching the graduation records in Marcus's journals. My stomach twists. 32 lives, 32 people who trusted Marcus, who believed in his vision of spiritual enlightenment. People like Jenny, who struggled with depression until Marcus convinced her she was ready for advancement. Like Paul, who started asking questions about community finances 6 months after Jenny disappeared. Like Sarah, who'd been with Marcus longer than anyone except him, almost 10 years, before she too graduated. The bailiff's voice cuts through my thoughts. All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Hoffman presiding. Marcus is led in wearing an orange jumpsuit that hangs loose on his frame. Prison has thinned him, but his eyes remain the same, piercing, and utterly convinced of his own righteousness. When he sees me, his lips curve into a slight smile, as though we share some private understanding. The trial begins with opening statements. D.A. Winters stands, her voice steady as she addresses the jury. This case is about betrayal of the most fundamental kind, she says. Marcus Shepard created a community based on trust, spiritual growth, and shared purpose. Then, systematically and with cold premeditation, he murdered 32 people who trusted him completely. She outlines the evidence: the bodies found on the back 40 acres, the meticulous journals documenting each murder, the financial records showing how Marcus siphoned money from the graduates after killing them. The defendant called these murders graduations, she continues. He celebrated these deaths with ceremonies. He told community members their friends were going to a spiritual retreat in Montana, a place that never existed, and all the while, he was strangling them and burying them on the very property where his followers lived and worked. Marcus's attorney, a sharp-featured man named Donovan, presents a defense that makes my blood boil. My client doesn't dispute that these individuals died, he says smoothly, but he maintains these were spiritual transformations, consensual rituals that sometimes resulted in death. These were adults who chose to participate in advanced spiritual practices. Murmurs ripple through the courtroom. A woman behind me, I later learn she's Jenny's sister, lets out a choked sob. The prosecution's case unfolds over 3 weeks. Forensic experts detail how each victim was sedated with the same compounds found in Marcus's purification tea before being strangled. Financial analysts trace how money from the graduates flowed into Marcus's offshore accounts. Former members testify about the community's isolation and Marcus's absolute authority. When it's my turn to testify, I walk to the stand feeling the weight of 32 lives on my shoulders. I swear to tell the truth, then meet Marcus's gaze directly for the first time since his capture. Can you tell us how you discovered what was happening at the Divine Light community? D.A. Winters asks. I describe finding the folder labeled Transitions in Marcus's office, the map with initials and dates. The moment I unearthed Lisa's body with the turquoise necklace I'd given her still around what remained of her neck. And prior to this discovery, what did Marcus Shepard tell community members about people who graduated? Winters asks. He said they were chosen to join an advanced spiritual retreat in Montana. I explain. He would drive them to the airport in his van. We celebrated their spiritual advancement with a ceremony the night before. We thought it was an honor. During cross-examination, Donovan tries to undermine my testimony by suggesting I was jealous of those chosen to graduate. Isn't it true that you were upset when your girlfriend Lisa was selected instead of you? He asks. No, I say firmly. Lisa was terrified. She discovered the Montana retreat didn't exist. The phone number was fake. The address was an empty field. She confronted Marcus about it, and the next morning, she was gone. Donovan's tactics grow more desperate as the trial progresses. He suggests the victims died accidentally during spiritual rituals. He claims Marcus buried them on the property to honor their connection to the land. The jury's expressions grow increasingly skeptical. The most damning evidence comes from Marcus's own journals. Pages projected onto screens show his detailed planning for each murder, how he selected victims who questioned him or had health issues that required expensive care, how he calculated the financial gain from each death, how he justified the killings as necessary pruning of the community. On the final day of testimony, Marcus insists on taking the stand against his attorney's advice. He sits straight-backed, his voice clear and measured, the same voice that once guided us through meditation sessions and spiritual teachings. I chose them because they were ready, he says, looking directly at the jury. Their physical bodies were holding back their spiritual evolution. I helped them transition to a higher plane of existence. And the money you took from them after their deaths? D.A. Winters asks during cross-examination. Material possessions have no meaning in the higher realms. Marcus replies without hesitation. They entrusted me with their worldly goods to support our community's work. The community you defrauded while murdering its members. Winters counters. Marcus smiles serenely. You see murder, I see transformation. They were chosen. They were special. The jury deliberates for just 4 hours before returning with their verdict. The courtroom falls silent as the foreman stands. On the count of first-degree murder of Lisa Brennan, we find the defendant guilty. With each name, each guilty pronouncement, I feel a weight lifting. Jenny, Paul, Sarah, all 32 victims acknowledged. Their deaths recognized not as spiritual transformations, but as what they truly were, murders. Marcus shows no reaction as the judge sentences him to consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. As they lead him away, he looks at me one last time. They'll understand someday, he says, and so will you. I don't respond. There's nothing to say to a man who believes murder is spiritual enlightenment. Outside the courthouse, Agent Keller hands me a business card. Dr. Melissa Chen, she says. She specializes in helping cult survivors. The Bureau will cover the costs for anyone who was part of the community. I nod, slipping the card into my pocket. Thank you. What will you do now? She asks. The question catches me off guard. For 8 years, my life was defined by Marcus and the Divine Light community. Then, for the past 6 months, it's been defined by the investigation and trial. Now, suddenly, I have to figure out who I am beyond all that. I've been talking with other survivors. I say, we're starting a support network, weekly meetings, online resources, a hotline. There are people still out there who don't know what really happened, who might be blaming themselves for friends who graduated. 2 weeks later, I stand in a community center meeting room, arranging chairs in a circle. Former members begin to arrive, some I recognize, others who left before I joined. We're all different ages, from different backgrounds, but we share the same haunted look, the same need to make sense of what happened to us. I thought I was the only one who had doubts. A woman named Rachel says during our first meeting, I left after Marcus told me I was being considered for graduation. Something felt wrong, but I spent years thinking maybe I'd missed my chance at spiritual enlightenment. Others nod. Similar stories emerge. People who sensed something was wrong but doubted their own instincts, who carried guilt for leaving friends behind. That's how he controlled us, I explain. He made us doubt ourselves while trusting him completely. We meet weekly after that. The group grows as more survivors find us. We create a website with resources for cult survivors. survivors, a database of therapists specializing in religious trauma, legal advice for those still untangling financial ties to the community. 6 months after the verdict, I visit Lisa's grave in the cemetery where her family reburied her. I place flowers beside her headstone. The turquoise necklace I'd given her, now hanging around my neck, returned to me by the forensics team after the trial. We're helping people, I tell her, making something good from something terrible. The wind rustles through the trees overhead, and for a moment, I feel a sense of peace that has nothing to do with Marcus's false spirituality. It's something real, the knowledge that while 32 lives ended too soon, those of us who survived are finding our way back to ourselves, one day at a time. As I walk back to my car, my phone buzzes with a text from one of the support group members. New person called the hotline today. Just left another community that sounds similar. Can you talk to her? I text back immediately. Of course. Tell her she's not alone, and neither am I. Not anymore.